There is a silent discomfort that few dare to admit, the feeling that the simple sound of the doorbell, the unexpected invitation, the request for company, carries something invasive, almost too sacred to be interrupted. We live in a world that glorifies noise, constant connection, and the continual presence of others. A world that calls strange the one who prefers the sound of their own breathing to the endless chatter of crowds. But perhaps, as Alan Watts once said, the man who knows how to be alone is never truly lonely, because there is a deep wisdom in those who withdraw. A wisdom that doesn't seek isolation out of fear, but out of respect. Respect for one's own energy, respect for one's inner temple. When you close the door and silence settles in, something awakens. The noise of the world dissolves, and what once seemed empty begins to reveal life. In that moment you realize your home is not just a shelter of walls, it's a mirror of the soul. Every corner, every object, every shadow carries the reflection of an inner state. And when someone enters, they don't just step on the floor. They cross the threshold of your very being. The spiritually awakened doesn't avoid visitors because they despise the world. They avoid them because the entire world lives within them. And certain inner landscapes can only bloom in silence. Chapter 1. The Social Mask and the Return Home. From an early age, we learn to wear faces that don't belong to us. We smile when the soul is tired, we speak when the heart longs for silence, and the world around us applauds. They say it's being sociable, that it's having empathy, that it's being normal. But the awakened one begins to feel the weight of this normality, the invisible fatigue of those who live performing roles in order to survive. Alan Watts said that life is like a cosmic play where each person wears a mask to perform the role of the self. But when you awaken, when you start to see through the illusion of roles, something in you cries out to return home. Not the home of bricks, but the inner home where there's no need to perform. When you close the door, you remove the costume of the world. The performance ends, the voice quiets. It's in that instant that the body breathes for the first time without effort. Because at home, the awakened one doesn't seek material comfort. They seek authenticity. Those who live consciously know that the home is a mirror of the self. External chaos reflects internal chaos. Silent order mirrors the balance of the soul. But when a visitor arrives, it's as if the social mask is required once again. The home stops being a temple and becomes a stage, and the awakened one instinctively withdraws, not out of aversion, but out of self-preservation. Because each visit forces them to put back on what they've spent years trying to take off. The return home is the return to oneself, and what the world calls isolation, the soul calls wholeness. Chapter 2. Energy, boundaries, and the sacredness of inner space. Few understand that every human presence carries an energetic field. Entering a home is more than crossing a door. It's crossing frequencies, and the spiritually awakened feel this with an intensity the ordinary world cannot grasp. For the conscious being, the home is an invisible altar. Every corner vibrates with the history of the emotions that rest there. That's why they cannot bear the casual invasion of those who arrive unaware of the weight of their own noise. It's not arrogance, it's sensitivity. It's knowing that every external energy can rearrange the delicate balance within. Watts said, "When you try to control the river, the water becomes murky, but when you observe it in silence, it becomes a mirror." Solitude is that mirror. It is the state in which the awakened one clears their own vibration so that the soul can reflect reality again. We live in an age of overstimulation, messages, notifications, invitations, noise, and the sensitive person becomes a vibrational battlefield. The mind begs for silence, but the world demands response. The body yearns for stillness, but the social clock pushes it outward. That's why they protect their home as one protects a temple. They close doors not out of rejection, but out of reverence. Because there, in the empty and silent space, their energy reorders, their cells realign, and their soul becomes music once again. The awakened one understands something the world has forgotten, that peace is not the absence of sound, but the presence of harmony, and to protect one's space is to protect one's being. Chapter 3. The Shadow and the Visitor. When the soul doesn't want to be interrupted. There are moments when the soul is under reconstruction, working in silence on the invisible foundations of being. At such times, the mere sound of the doorbell can feel like an earthquake. Not because the other brings harm, but because the encounter with the other threatens to undo something still in formation. Carl Jung said that the shadow is everything we don't want to be, but are. And when we are at home, alone, it's with the shadow that we converse. The shadow manifests in pauses, in memories that arise from nowhere, in emotions that ask to be acknowledged. And the work is delicate, like assembling a spiritual puzzle. Each piece must be placed with care. But then the visitor arrives, and the table moves, the pieces scatter, the process is interrupted. The spiritually awakened know this. They know that there are phases when retreat is a form of healing. They know that sometimes the presence of another is too soon. Not because they don't love them, but because they're not yet ready to be seen. Wounds are being cleansed, fears are being dissolved, truths are being born, and when the visitor insists on entering, they don't understand that they're crossing a sacred threshold. They're stepping into the territory where the awakened reconciles with their shadows. So when the awakened one avoids visits, they're not being cold, they're being faithful. Faithful to their process, faithful to the inner voice that whispers, "Not now, not yet. I need to listen to myself." And you? Have you ever felt that discomfort when someone invades your silence? Share in the comments. Perhaps another awakened soul needs to know they're not alone. Chapter 4. The Hermit's Call, Solitude as a Path of Healing. There is an ancient archetype that crosses centuries and reappears in every awakening soul, the hermit. He lives in the mountains of stories, in the caves of myths, in the silent dawns of those seeking to understand their own being. The hermit is the one who answers the inner call to withdraw, not out of disdain, but out of reverence. When Alan Watts spoke of the man who retreats, he said, "True loneliness is not the absence of company, it is the full presence of oneself." The hermit understands this intuitively. He knows there's a difference between isolation and solitude. The former is escape, the latter is communion. Escape is withdrawing from the world out of fear. Communion is withdrawing from the world to rediscover the whole within oneself. The spiritually awakened person realizes that every social encounter fragments them a little, that every conversation disperses them, that every external presence demands adaptation. And amid that noise, the soul's call becomes ever clearer. Return, be still, listen. This call is ancient. It is the same that led monks to the desert, sages to temples, poets to inner exile. It is the same that today makes you turn off your phone, close the curtains, and simply breathe. But the modern hermit faces a different kind of solitude. He doesn't hide from the physical world, but from overstimulation. He doesn't seek caves, but moments where time slows down and the soul can hear itself again. Solitude becomes the laboratory where consciousness expands, where the heart aligns with essence. And it is in that state that the awakened one heals, not through words or distractions, but through the silent listening of all that lives within. When the mind quiets, the body understands, and the heart finds peace. Loneliness ceases to be absence and becomes source. If this message resonated with you, like the video, it helps the channel reach other seekers who are also hearing the call of silence. Chapter 5. The paradox of presence, becoming whole before being with another. There is a profound paradox in the journey of the awakened. They must withdraw in order to truly connect. Society teaches that love is constant togetherness, that being with someone is proof of affection. But those who walk the inner path discover that true presence only arises after retreat. What's said that love is not attachment, it is space. And the awakened person knows that they can only offer space after learning to inhabit it within themselves. The encounter with another is a mirror, and if you arrive empty, you bring only need. But if you arrive whole, you share fullness. Solitude is the cradle of authenticity. When the awakened chooses to be alone, they are polishing their own energy so that when the encounter happens, it is real. They don't run from others, they simply prepare to meet them without masks. That's why the hermit doesn't reject humanity. He has merely learned to measure his presence. Because he knows that each time he mingles without being centered, he loses parts of himself. The ordinary man believes that to love is to always be available. The awakened one understands that to love is to be whole, even from afar. He knows that true presence is silent, light, and free of demand, and that before touching the world, one must touch one's own soul. Here comes the practice. Sit for a few minutes in silence. Close your eyes. Imagine gathering your own energy, like a river returning to its source. Breathe deeply and repeat mentally, I return to myself. I find myself again. I restore myself. Do this whenever you feel the weight of excessive contact. You will notice that solitude doesn't distance you from people. It purifies you to be with them more truthfully. This is the paradox of presence. The deeper you go into yourself, the more capable you become of loving others without losing yourself in them. Chapter 6. The space between sound and silence. Learning to breathe in the void. There is a moment when silence becomes so dense you can almost touch it. It is there that the awakened one learns to breathe again, not with the body, but with the being. The world fears this void because in it there are no distractions, no stories to tell, no roles to perform. But it is precisely in this void that the sacred takes place. Watt said, "You cannot understand music if you don't honor the silence between the notes." And so it is with spiritual life. Silence is the interval that gives meaning to sound. The awakened learns that their energy is like a melody. It needs pauses, it needs breath, it needs stillness. Those who live in constant presence of others become noise. The awakened, on the other hand, becomes melody, because they have understood that the truest sound is born from the deepest silence. The home, then, becomes a breathing space. Every wall absorbs calm. Every object becomes a witness of retreat. When they walk through the space, they feel the echo of their own soul vibrating in simple things. A cup, a soft light, the distant sound of wind. There, they remember that life doesn't need to be filled all the time. The void is fertile, silence is complete, and when they meet others again, something has changed. They no longer arrive seeking company, but to share presence. They no longer speak to fill the air, but to reveal what silence has taught them. And that is why the spiritually awakened prefer seclusion, because they've discovered that the true dialogue with the world begins within. Solitude is the divine interval where the being restores itself, and when the world insists on invading that space, the awakened simply smiles, closes the door, and returns to silence, because they know that the sound of their own soul is the only one worth listening to. Conclusion: the silent retreat of the soul. In the end, what the world calls loneliness is merely the soul returning home. The one who awakens does not flee from life. They embrace it on a level few understand. They know that the true encounter with another is only possible after the reunion with oneself. That's why they protect silence, as one would protect a rare flower in the storm. Alan Watts said that, "You are the universe experiencing itself." And if that's true, then withdrawal is not distancing, it's immersion. It's the moment when the universe within you asks to be heard without interference. The spiritually awakened one knows that subtle forces operate in the unseen. They feel when an external presence disturbs inner harmony and honor the instinct that asks for distance. There is no guilt in saying no. There is no selfishness in wanting to be alone. There is wisdom in recognizing that certain parts of the self only bloom in the darkness of silence. When you close the door, you're not isolating, you're opening. When you refuse the noise, you're not escaping, you're listening. And when you choose the void, you're choosing wholeness. Solitude is the soul's silent retreat. It is the space where the I dissolves so that the being can reveal itself. And in the end, the awakened one understands. There is no loneliness in being with one's essence. There is communion, there is presence, there is life. So if the world calls you distant, smile. Because only those who have learned to walk alone are truly capable of connection. Solitude doesn't separate you, it unites you. It is the portal where the human remembers to be divine. If this message touched something within you, subscribe to Inner Sanctuary, share this video, and tell us in the comments, what has silence been teaching you?